A very good morning, everyone. My name is Saran Kaba. I'm a pharmacist by trade. I'm an activist, too, from civil society, a former minister and former United Nations employee. So, in fact, I've had to face a range of different situations in my life. But what I want to talk to you about today is an example of women leaders who were able to settle one of those conflicts which was deemed to be one of the most violent in the 21st century, the Liberia and Sierra Leone civil wars. In 1999, female leaders from Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea began to think that the international community and the governments of countries affected by war had already wasted enough time and not found a solution to ensure that the peace agreements that had already been signed were respected. Peace agreements had been signed, and 2 weeks later they were flouted. So the group of women that we were started wondering why there was such systematic violation of the peace agreements, and something just wasn't working. So we had a think, and the very first thing that we noticed was that some real actors in the conflict were not sitting at the negotiating table. And amongst these, there was the priests of the sacred forest. And those who are in the room here and are from Africa know what I'm talking about. This is part of the cultural heritage of our societies. The army has a soldier's code. Civil society, especially these sacred forests, have a code for them. The rebels obey the code of the sacred forests, and the armies obey the army's code, which is derived from the Napoleonic Code. But there where war is, nobody understands or knows about the Napoleonic Code. So, of course, communication just was not getting through. You were getting peace agreements, the rebels were interpreting them in their way, and clearly the governments that use Western positive law, European law essentially, had their own interpretation. So that was the first thing that we noticed. The second was that the real victims of war are children and women, and there were none of them that were involved in the negotiations. No women at all. And so when you go to negotiations, everyone feels very strongly about their own legitimacy and their own representation, and I don't know what else. So they simply pitted one against the other. And that was the second thing that we noticed. The third was that never, ever during those negotiations did anyone wonder, are we ever really talking about anything? Is anyone ever really interested in peace? Are people interested in peace, in fact? Aren't there some who, in fact, want there to be no peace because they're trading in weapons, because they want to provide humanitarian aid, because they want to make sure that there's something interesting to print in the news media? So maybe not everyone really is interested in peace. And that was the third question that we asked ourselves. So the women leaders that we were decided to go and meet the decision makers in the states that were involved. And in fact, I seized this opportunity to greet Kofi Annan and thank him, the former UN Secretary General, of course. And he listened to us. And I also greet Mr. Ulins, former president of Ghana, who said, I don't know my father, but I know my mother. And when she talks, I listen. So we went there. And we went to the ECOWAS summit of heads of state, and we said to them, look, what you're doing about this is what works and this is what doesn't. We met the leaders of Liberia, Sierra Leone, Comte from Guinea, each of them with their own specific approach. One was an army general, so we spoke to him as one speaks to an army general. Saran Kaba is a former UN official, so we speak to him in that way. And Chien de Law is a former rebel who became a head of state, so we addressed him in that manner. And the outcome of all that was that we were able to convince them to all sit round the same table and to strike the June 2003 agreement in Accra, in Ghana. And the United Nations asked us to be co-signatories to that agreement. And in December 2003, our organization won the United Nations Human Rights Prize. So the general lesson that we can draw from all of this is that sometimes I think we don't make enough use of the extraordinary potential that women have when it comes to negotiation and mediation. This is the first lesson. And secondly, we always function on the base of knowledge of what we've done 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and we never question, or we don't enough question what we're actually doing now in the international community. And finally, I think that in those countries, including the country I come from, half of the population is less than 30 years old. So they simply know nothing about the First or Second World War. They are plunged in the world of information technology. We live in a global village now. What happens in my village now is on TV, and we have to bear that in mind when we want to build peace. Thank you.